that.
Hey, let's see. We gotta wait on
You know what I need to do?
everybody. Add some tech difficulties at the top.
Yeah, you know. So
How it is.
we're actually, people can see us.
I believe so.
Oh,
All
boy.
right then.
That's now I'm nervous. I didn't bank on that. All right, I'm actually gonna run a clock, and then when someone gives me a cue, let's.
Want me to finish?
Uh,
We're gonna finish and come back, everybody. Hold on
we
one
are.
second. Unless he's ready to go. Oh, he's
Alright.
good. All right, we're good.
So I've got the cue. You let me know.
Go ahead.
Affordable housing. What is it? It turns out it's not so easy to define based on the conversations I've had. Everyone seems to have their own definition of it. And it's something that is on all of our minds. So guess what? We're going to talk about it on the HomeBuyer's Hour this morning. In studio, we have one of my friends and colleagues, Steve Davis. Steve, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself.
Sure. Steve Davis, Kamar Group, Compass Real Estate. You can reach me at 312-513-6314, or my email address is stevedavis@compass.com, or my Instagram is I'm Steve Davis.
All right, good stuff. I've been looking at the numbers lately, and quite frankly, I've been disappointed. And really, we only have ourselves to blame. When I say numbers, I mean, viewership and listeners and all that. So we've decided we need to shake up the lineup. We need to get some new blood in here. We need to get some people who can really impress the listeners, and to really bring something to the table that our friend. I love him dearly, but it's for some reason the Home Buyers Hour with Charles Bellefontaine just isn't getting things done. So we brought his colleague Mark McCutcheon in, who I think is going to do an excellent job of actually impressing some people this week. Sorry, Charlie.
Hey, everybody, it's Mark McCutcheon, again with Chicagoland Home Inspectors. You can reach out to us if you need to schedule an inspection at 312-544-9180 or at thehomeinspectors.com.
That's what's up. And right, so one thing, and we already have an improvement, is that I now know how to find the websites, because what you've said is the Home Inspectors instead of the Home Inspectors.
Very Chicago accent, Charlie.
All right. I gotta stop bagging on
Dems,
Charlie.
theirs, does, and A's.
He's gonna call in and give me the
He's throwing those things back and forth already.
Oh, right, that's right. He's I should have given
darts.
him.
Yeah.
He's gonna have a virtual malarkey flag. And today, unfortunately, our favorite, and even if he's not here, he's still my favorite mortgage broker, Joey Mathews. He has been stricken with the flu. He has children, and when they get sick, guess what? I'm told that's what happens. So instead of torturing him and making him talk about what the mortgage rates are right now, instead of him getting plenty of fluids and we're gonna give him the week off, and everyone out there, go get vaccinated, and try to stop the spread of all this stuff. I've heard it's going around. All right, enough of that PSA. By the way, we are on 8:20 a.m. where facts matter, and so let's get talking about it. Steve, the reason I brought this topic up is because Alderman Robinson, who is our alderman for the 4th Ward here in Chicago, came and gave and talked to us in my building last night about a variety of topics. The migrant issue being the top one really that city government is dealing with. But another thing that came up in connection with the discussion, I think that's been ongoing across the country really, is affordable housing and how to get more of it out there. And a lot of people have the idea that because there is quite a bit of commercial space that is vacant at the moment, that is an opportunity to convert that space into residential. And there are some hurdles to converting commercial space. When you're talking about high rises, it's not like you can just wave a magic wand, throw up some walls, and turn those into apartments, because the way they're constructed, even with the utilities and different things, there's a lot more to it than just partitioning it off, right? So one thing that the alderman said is that what they really aim to do is to increase housing that is available for working class folks, and he defined those folks as people who are earning a household income of between $55,000 and $60,000 a year. Now, I found that to be interesting, and so did my wife. As a matter of fact, she really, her ears perked up because she was thinking, what is the definition of working class? What is affordable housing? And Steve, when I talked to you earlier this morning about working class and affordable housing being housing aimed at people with household incomes between 55 and 60K, you had a reaction to that, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. I mean, the thing is that, between 55 and 60K, I think it depends on where you're living at. So depending on what county, depending on if you're in the city or if you're actually outside of the city, if you're down south, that sort of thing. The thing is that I think the affordable housing aspect, I still think it's regulated by the government, by, by the state. And I'm not talking about Section 8 aspect, I'm talking about in general. And they say that poverty, according to what we were looking at this morning, was, as low as, 23,600 in the city, which I happen to think is extremely low.
Extremely.
But at the same time, I mean, I guess it depends, right? As far as the migrant aspect to it and where they should go and what's best for them and so on, that's obviously something that's out of our immediate control. The public's thought process with this is that, oh yeah, there's a bunch of commercial space and we should be able to make that happen and blah blah blah. And like you said, it's not as cut and dry as just putting partitions up and we're good to go. So
yeah, one thing that the alderman brought up is that, say for example, storefronts that are set up as commercial space, those are probably more amenable to becoming residential space. But in terms of that moving the needle, converting a handful of storefronts into residences, that's not going to solve the problem, right? It's very much a Band-Aid approach. So, and I don't think we want to be so short-sighted to say, well, let's convert all of our commercial space that's available into residential space and then create a crisis of having no commercial space either. And that was also something that the alderman touched on, which is that, these approaches need to be thought about more as long-term solutions as opposed to, let's do this thing now because of this immediate problem that we're trying to solve and create 7 problems going forward. And, those kinds of approaches are not sustainable, I don't think. When we talk about affordable housing, I think with here at the HomeBuyer's Hour, we're typically talking about purchasing and sale of residences, right?
Yep.
We're not really talking about the rental market. So maybe we can touch on, at different price points. Mark, maybe you can kind of chime in here. Mm-hmm. Does the price of the home, does that ever come into consideration in so far as when you are approaching a home that you're going to inspect?
Not really. I mean, we have the same process. I think everything comes down to process for us. The same process happens for every single house, whether, no matter the size of it. But I would say that we do tend to find more issues typically with a lower priced house than we would see with the higher end homes. And I think some of that has to do with the sophistication of the buyers, because they understand, this isn't their first home. Typically when it's a more expensive house, they understand, have been in other houses and know what to look for, fix and stuff like that. A lot of times for the lower end stuff, it's a first time home buyer, or they're in a jam or something where they can't get much past it, and things tend to be wrong with it because they're kind of trying to just get along with the minimum that they can do so that they don't have to spend a lot of money and stuff. So we see more issues typically on lower price point houses.
Would you also say it's because of when they built the house in general?
Yes, so
as well?
It's definitely a combination. So those, they're doing some really good work in trying to bring up the level of code and stuff that they're doing for all the new builds that we're doing for lower end brand new buildings for lower end housing, but the old stock was definitely slapped together fast. So you have a double whammy of it wasn't built really great to begin with, compounded with the fact that then over time as it went on, it wasn't taken care of as well. So that just multiplies, So it's extremely important, essentially, to get a home inspection on lower end houses because they tend to have a lot of trouble.
Yeah, no, there's no
makes
doubt
sense.
about that. I mean, an inspection I think is critical for just about anyone, especially your average consumer that's not investing in real estate regularly, to get a pair of eyes that is trained to look and see what's going on. I often, especially when someone is buying their starter home, I often encounter situations where they're looking at it and it's like, look, I don't have it in the budget. Once I buy this house and I spend a significant chunk of my liquid, of my
No
liquid
more funds,
assets,
no more funds after the purchase.
yeah, if I've got to put a new roof on for 15 grand, in 6 months' time, it's not there.
Yeah.
And those kinds of things, they can really compound on top of themselves. You can't replace the roofs, and now you've got leaks that are coming in, and now you're spending that money you would be saving on drywall repairs and other things like that.
On the patch repairs, yeah, exactly. So, without question, if you have a tight budget post the purchase of the property, then you need to really understand what is going on with the house and then budget those problems moving forward so that you know what to expect. And if you can do your math on that, if it doesn't add up, then you probably should be looking for a house that's further along or in better shape or whatever you want to call it, so that you don't have those surprise issues / money coming at you, after you've already bought it.
Steve, is that typically something you're going to talk to the inspector about? Look, as far as this particular buyer and their financial situation, they're really you really need to key in on perhaps some of the more expensive big ticket items and make sure that we're not looking at at least to the extent that you can identify things of that nature, or as opposed to someone who might be further along in their journey, and you say, look, the focus is a bit different with this buyer. Is that a conversation you would have with an inspector?
So I preempt my clients all the time after, before we have the inspection, kind of what they can expect, for what the inspector is going to find. Also to provide, resources in any way that I can to explain, this is going to come up. This is probably going to be a red flag. You have to understand that it's not that big of a deal. Basically, what that means is this, right? So, yeah, I mean, I have that conversation with my clients. I always preempt them so they're aware, especially first-time home buyers, because they can get nervous based on the fact that they've never done this before. We do this every single day, as well as inspectors do this every single day. So, yeah, I mean, when it comes down to that, having the conversation beforehand for sure. And then when it comes to the inspector, and their inspection and findings, I use inspectors that are based on, being truthful and honest to my clients, and more importantly, know what they're doing. I think when you, work with any kind of buyer, especially a first-time home buyer, they need to be aware of what's super important.
Yeah,
So-
they need to be educated.
Yeah,
Right? Like I was getting to earlier,
education-
they don't know.
Education is key, and unless you have the experience to give them, as well as to preempt them on certain things, it's going to come to a shock to them, and it might really worry them to buy a house in general. So the answer to that is absolutely have that conversation beforehand, and then also use a reputable company as well. That makes a huge difference.
Yeah, no, there's no question about that. Let me bring up perhaps a tangential topic, which is, I think, and I think I have conversations with Charlie off air more than on air about this particular thing. But I know he's big on encouraging people to, all things considered equal, to buy rather than rent. Do you ever get into situations where you're, in terms of educating a client, you're showing them comparable, like, here's what your monthly payment would be mortgage-wise for, the type of home that you want to purchase, as opposed to, what the rents are with something comparable. Do you ever get into that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have that conversation with people a lot, especially with last year, based on the fact that the rates were on the higher side. Obviously, it made a big difference with people saying, "Well, should I rent? Should I buy?" And it's that difficult conversation for them to decide and to realize, okay, this is there's some value here, there's not some value here. Maybe we should wait. Maybe we should go. We buy now, then we refinance, so on. That was our pitch last year to explain to the clients, and some people took advantage of that, knowing that it's going to be a very different market than it is this year. So when it comes down to that, I always work on the pluses and the minuses of buying versus renting. The other thing is, I have a rule of thumb: if you're spending over $2,500 in rent, you're buying. Like, it's silly not to, because the chances of you spending less on a typical mortgage per month, even with assessments, that's over $2,500. You might as well buy and actually build the equity. So that's my rule of thumb. However, it's got to be right per person, right? So it's individualized. If you just like we talked about the education aspect with buying a house, understanding inspection. Well, if you're deciding to purchase versus rent, it's the same thing, which is help educate the consumer out there, making sure they understand, here's your options, here's why. Does this make sense? Does it, which way does it make sense per se? So having that conversation, it's all about education. It's the same thing as anything in our business. It's all about educating, make sure the clients have the facts to make the best decision for themselves.
I mean, everybody's unique. It's just like every house. Every house that we inspect is going to have something different than the last thing. Everybody's financial scenario is going to be different than the rest.
Right.
And those two things matched together are going to be unique themselves. So, communication is excellent on all fronts for who you're hiring as professional.
Yeah.
Well, Steve, I don't have 20% to put down. How am I supposed to buy a house?
It's a great question. There's other opportunities, other products out there that you can do. There's a new thing since, I want to say it was the 19th of November it came out, maybe, give or take. Obviously, our favorite mortgage lender isn't here right now to answer that question. But it's where you can put 5% down on a single up to a certain price point, a 2 flat up to a certain price point, a 3 flat up to 2 to 4 units. And you only have to put 5% down. So, no, you don't have to have that much money. It all depends on your credit. It all depends on your income. It all depends on all those different things. And obviously, a lender will break that down for you more. But, your insight of, I don't have 5% to put down, or I don't have 20% to put down. The misconstruement out there is the same thing as I always say, which is you need to have the facts before making the decision. Mm-hmm. And if you have the facts, then you can make the decision that's best for you.
Yeah. I mean, there's no question about that. And some of this might sound obvious, right? Some of you might be sitting there watching or listening to this, and you're thinking, well, duh, but it has come to my attention, let's just say this, being that I am, so far in this business, a lot of this stuff, to me, it goes without saying, right? That you can put down 3.5% on an FHA loan and borrow the rest of it. And, a lot of times that sort of thing, even though I can conceptualize it, I've seen all the paperwork, I've seen what, that can end up being in terms of a monthly payment. I mean, shoot, I bought the condo I live in today, I bought it with an FHA loan, 3% down. And, it's fantastic that's available. But when you're talking, numbers, 3.5% of 100,000 is 3,500. Mm-hmm. So if you're going to buy a $200,000 home, it's $7,000 that you've got to come up with out of pocket. If you're going to buy a $300,000 home, it's 10.5. Okay.
Well, then you have to worry about closing costs as well. So you got to add those things in too.
What I often find is that when you're looking, if your income is fine but you're cash poor, that's where you start to talk about closing costs being paid by the seller, things of that nature. I mean, there's literally a space in the multi-board 7.0 to fill in for closing costs. So you can get seller assistance with that. then it can call into question sometimes whether or not it's going to appraise out. More often than not, it does appraise out. And being able to leverage the fact that you can afford monthly payment X, I think the reason I'm bringing this up is just to, for the tens of people that are going to hear this, I want you to know that even if you feel like, gee, I just don't have the cash to make this work, you would be surprised. You would be surprised if you have a 401k. You may be able to leverage that by borrowing from it without paying that penalty. Or an IRA, for example, you can take some money that you might have saved for retirement and utilize that in certain circumstances. And I wish Joey was here to kind of talk more about that, because often you will sort of overlook the fact that you have these savings that they're not accessible to you necessarily, to pay for certain to pay for your ongoing expenses. But for the specific instance of buying a home, you may be able to unlock that and leverage it.
But you can definitely do that, but you can also possibly get credits from the seller. But you have to understand the market as well. So again, it goes back to education. It goes back to communicating with your client and letting him know, listen, this is an option, but we also have to find a seller that would be willing to give that closing credit or give that this or that or whatever. And the thing is that too many times agents will promise something they can't deliver, and that's not fair. And the fact is that you're not supposed to do that to convince a buyer to buy a property. Here are your options. Excuse me. Here are your options. Here are possibilities. But also understand that this, during whatever market you're at, so if our market right now, the chances of me telling you that we could get closing credits is probably not going to happen.
Probably not good.
No, because the supply and demand, and the buyers are coming out of the woodwork, because we all knew that when the rates were going to come down, prices are either going to stay the same or go up, and the inventory is not going to get any better. Sure, there's going to be about 30 properties that pop up instead of 5, but now you've got twice as many buyers. So you're going to have, when it comes down to trying to get a closing cost credit,
you got steep competition.
That's true.
It's crazy.
That's true.
And that's the thing you have to explain to buyers, especially first-time home buyers. They're all excited about doing this, but if you don't help them stay educated, and you don't help them stay understanding the markets, then you're doing a disservice to them immediately.
Steve, I'm glad you brought that up, because it is super important. If you're just going to go and ram your head against the wall and make an offer on a property that's already got 10 competing offers, and you are going to have some less than solid, you're not going to be an 80-20 borrower, for example, there's a good chance that you're not going to win that bidding war. But there are certainly properties out there that aren't necessarily getting those that level of competitiveness. And, it depends on where you're looking, what you're looking for. Take, for example, if you're trying to do that 4-unit building that is in an emerging neighborhood that needs some work done, you may be able to walk in there with an FHA 203K offer, knowing that you're going to do some work to the property, that you're going to level it up, and that's where you can see things that a lot of other people can't. You're in a different market entirely when you're looking along those lines, as opposed to someone that's looking to buy a turnkey condo in River North, and they don't want to do anything to it. But
again, how are you going to get an FHA loan if the property is not FHA approved? If you play the game long enough, in other words, you're in the business long enough, you know what's going to be acceptable as FHA and what is not. So creating proper expectations for your clients will make a big difference too.
Yeah, no, there's no question about it. There's no question about it. You're doing everyone a disservice if you're just gonna run around without any sort of concept of what makes sense and what doesn't. You're gonna waste your time, you're gonna waste the buyer's time, all that stuff. All right, as Charlie is fond of saying,
yeah.
Let's go around the horn. Mark, tell me about your company. Tell me about the the owner, who is just our favorite person around,
Sure.
and how the heck do you go about hiring you or one of your colleagues?
Well, if you needed to get us on the interwebs and you wanted to look up all our reviews and stuff, you can go to thehomeinspectors.com, and there you'll see just a lot of people weighing in on what an exceptional service that we do have. Besides that, you could call 312-544-9180 if you wanted to schedule over the phone. What sets us apart, I think, is Charlie and all of us. I mean, everybody that is an inspector in our group is very, very good, and we're well trained. And I think, but more than anything, and what we've kind of been dancing around here on this whole conversation is communication. I think everybody is a very strong communicator in our group.
Yeah. We had a very spirited discussion at breakfast this morning about, really how difficult it can be to work with people that just don't value communicating things that are happening.
Exactly. And especially on a home inspection, what the thing is that you're getting into some technical territory. So there's two ways that it can go. You can have somebody who's an inspector that comes in and is like, that's wrong, and gets everybody into a tizzy. Or you can have somebody that's like, yeah, that might be wrong, but this happens often, and kind of takes you through the nuances of how that could come to be in the house, and then what it takes to fix it, and is it that big a deal or not. So all those kind of nuances of communication and just walking people through it is something that's above and beyond. Not all companies do that, and I think that's why we excel and get all the good reviews and stuff, is especially first-time home buyers, because they're the ones that really... They've never dealt with a water heater before. They've never seen a furnace act weird. They've never looked at their electrical panel. So you're just kind of taking them through like, hey, this is how it works. This is typical. Yours is the right size for this type of house. All those different things is stuff that you can depend on all of our guys to do.
Yeah.
But more than anything, I would say is Charlie, in the sense that we are very unique, that he would go over, if you want to, it's optional, but if you wanted to go over the report again with him, now you get a second inspector's eyes of somebody who's been in the field for decades, looking at that report again and kind of talking it through with you as the client, as the buyer person who's gotten the report, to understand again, oh yeah, what does this mean? Like, how bad is it? Because inevitably what happens at inspections, I'm sure that both of you, or definitely Steve knows, that you get overwhelmed. There's so many things going on. First-time buyers, they're hearing 1,000 things that are wrong with the house at once after they were just in love with it. So now they're stressed out. They're not retaining information. At the end of that, they get a report that's miles long, and ours are a mile long. Any reputable company should have one that's that long, in a sense, because there's a lot to discuss. But they get overwhelmed. So to go over it again and slow down and take your time, and Charlie would schedule time with you to go through the report again, talk about it, see if he concurs with what we found, and just sort of hold your hand through that report process again, I think is invaluable, and it removes anxiety from buyers.
Yeah, it's a unique
definitive.
feature.
If he sees something and is like, that's really bad, you have a definitive answer. Yeah, we should this is a problem.
This is a $35,000 issue that's going to pop up, sooner
soon.
than later.
Right.
But yeah, that the second set of eyes is really the unique aspect of I think what you guys have to offer. And to me, one thing that's really important in an inspector is someone that is going to remove their ego from the situation. I really don't want an inspector who views themselves as like the savior. I'm going to save you from every situation, because now you're looking at things from the perspective of, I need to find something wrong so that I can, so that my identity as your savior is
intact,
is preserved, right?
Right.
It's no good. It's not a good situation to be in.
No.
So I'm glad that you talk about being more pragmatic about it. I love that approach. Steve, tell me about you.
So Steve Davis, my number is 312-513-6314, and my email address is stevedavis@compass.com, and my Instagram would be I'm Steve Davis. One of the things you brought up, I think, is crucial, and I would emphasize it again, Mark, is the fact of being able to get a second set of eyes on it. As a agent that is representing the buyer, and going through it and preempting them before the inspection, and obviously going through it as we're going through the inspection. I think, our job is to help them understand things, but at the same time, the re-emphasis of saying, listen, this probably is not going to be a big deal. Obviously the inspection will show, the report itself will show, where we're at with this and if it is a big deal and so on. And then we can put a price point on it and see if we want to move forward or we don't.
Right.
And I think with Charlie doing the follow-up aspect is probably one of the best things that any inspection company can do, because it makes a big difference, and they feel like not only are they getting the advice from their agent, who they're trusting to, work with them on their biggest purchase of their life, but also to get a reiteration from an inspector who actually is even more advanced than the agent is, because they do a different profession, right?
I think it comes down to, too, is what you're getting at, is that, tell me if I'm wrong, but like the time to do it. So I think a lot of times you don't get you have an inspector who's very busy, and they're sometimes doing 2, 3, up to even 4 sometimes inspections a day. They don't have time to give those calls, or they're in between everything to kind of get back to you and like go over that report, and they're going to be brief and quick. And so now they're very busy. When Charlie's just doing this all the time, I mean, he's sending it as soon as the inspection's done. He's sending out here's my schedule. Let's set up an hour to talk. Now, you've automatically just had time to go over this again, where everybody can get together and work together to try to sift through what's important to us or not, or you just don't get that from everybody sheerly because of how busy they are. He's dedicated himself to this communication, really.
But I also think that even if you're busy, you still do your job.
Yeah,
and
totally.
I think that's a big thing that a lot of different professions lack.
Yeah.
We had this conversation this morning. This would be another hour of a podcast, but the fact is communication in all aspects, especially when you're working with someone who is, making one of the biggest decisions in their life, they need to have that special attention.
Sure.
And whether or not you're working with 10 people at the same time, they need to feel like they're number one. And that's what makes a big difference in our business. And that's,
without question.
And I would say that's one of the main reasons why I've been as fortunate as I have, as I continue to be, is being able to provide that value. And you could, fortunately, there'd be, 90% of my clients would tell you the same thing, which is there's no other way of doing things.
Yeah, I think there's some people, and it sounds like we're very similar. Some people just have the natural tendency to be inquisitive and go further and just want to help and really know. Right. So when I go into an inspection and stuff, I really actually truly want to kind of figure out that house. I want to know. That's just my natural inquisitiveness, so I take my time, and we only do one a day for that reason. If I show up and it's pretty good, it's going to go fast. Like I'm looking around pretty hard. It's going to go quick. If it's taking me a long time, there's a reason for that, because there's some just trouble with the house, usually. And I want to know really well what's going on so that I can then relate that information to them and be like, hey, it didn't make sense to me. I looked into it a little bit harder, and I think I have an idea of what's happening. And, you can move on from there.
The specific attention to detail makes a big difference.
Yeah, exactly.
And I appreciate it from a realtor perspective, and I know the homeowner or the purchaser would be as well.
But the way that you were talking earlier, even saying stuff about like, it's not necessarily the end if you don't think that you have the budget to do this stuff, or the way that you're talking about walking them through their rental scenario. That's the extra effort there. That's not just jumping into like, oh, I want to make a sale, so you could definitely be able to buy a house. Let's go looking. You're going to walk them through.
And there
is that
are
possible?
those realtors out there. So
there's
just
tons of them.
throwing it out there for anyone who's listening to this, because I'll tell you what, that happens all the time.
I see it.
I love getting those clients, because I realize that as soon as they had a bad experience with another client or another agent, I'm golden, because I don't do that.
You're going to look like a hero right away just from the talking.
I just think it's important to be honest.
Yeah.
Like, it just doesn't. I've walked into properties before where I'm just like, I don't know if this is going to be a good fit based on your search criteria, based on what you're looking for. Yeah. And that's just, and I'm not telling them one way or another. I just say, this is my opinion.
Yeah.
But I'm not the one buying the property.
Right.
Right. So it's the same thing as after an inspection. You know, listen, there is a considerable amount of damage here, considerable amount of things that you have to deal with, but it's some things out there. Are you willing to take them on or not? If not, that's okay.
Yeah.
You know, but if you are, then understand this is what you're getting yourself into.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Eyes wide open.
You're looking for turnkey,
Right.
and this place looks like the house in Home Alone too.
Just watched it.
One thing, my wife
Holiday
likes it too.
season.
Yeah, you gotta, the one thing that takes me out of that movie is the orange face guy. But anyways,
Put himself in. Did you ever read that? Well, we'll get into it.
I'll Google it later. I'm sure I'll be horrified. I'm Patrick Loftus.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Tell us about yourself.
How
Come
about,
on.
how about a
Tell us about you.
segue? How about a segue?
Yeah, we killed your around the horn.
No
No.
worries.
The
No
ball
worries.
stopped.
You know, dropping the ball all the time. I'm Patrick Loftus. I'm a real estate lawyer with Loftus Law. Find me on social media at Loftus_law on Instagram, at Loftus Law on TikTok. I post on social media just about every day.
Every day. It's pretty cool.
And
It's good stuff.
I, cancel myself every other day. It's wonderful. It's wonderful. That's how you get all the views on TikTok, is to say something super controversial, like, no one,
Provocative.
like not everyone deserves, affordable housing. See, I just canceled myself. So, there's 25
On WCPT, man.
where facts matter. So that was meant as,
Yeah,
tongue
he's
in
kidding.
cheek. So I want to kind of turn the conversation a little bit to something that I didn't tell either of you at
Ooh.
breakfast. How about that?
Surprise topic.
Not very surprised.
Yeah. One of my favorite activities is to doom scroll various social media, whether it be TikTok or Reddit.
Could you explain what that means, please?
Doom
for the,
scroll?
For the people that don't know what that means.
So doom scroll, yeah. Doom
Have you never
scrolling-
heard it before?
Doom scroll?
Yeah, doom
I
scroll.
have no idea what that
Oh,
means.
all right. He'll go.
Steve, I love Steve because he's got such a positive outlook.
Yeah, right.
He doesn't,
He never heard of
doesn't
doom
even know
scrolling.
what doom scrolling is.
That's
Doom scrolling is that type of thing where it's 1 a.m. You should have been in bed about an hour ago.
Uh-huh.
But you've gone down a rabbit hole,
Yeah,
of,
rabbit
of,
hole.
of some kind of thing that is just making you. It's usually making you upset. It's provocative.
Yeah, you're thinking,
And-
you've read it now, you think the world's going to end, and you're going deeper and deeper down.
And
into
you
like
just-
a rabbit
Yeah,
keep
no, that's
doing
my
this.
wife. That's not me.
Yeah,
Well, that's good.
So she's right. So my wife is responsible for both her mind and my mind. Sounds like your wife is in the same the
my wife
boat.
does.
I think it's all about how you perceive life and what's going on around you and everything else. Sometimes people are, they have to understand every little detail to understand every little thing that's going on in the world or whatever. I'm not a person that puts my head in the sand per se, but at the same time, like, if it's one thing, that's something major that's happening, they're gonna talk about it again. And I don't need to keep looking into it.
Well, for me,
My opinion.
if I ultimately find out enough about something, I can control it somehow, which is totally not true. But that's that's how my brain works. So, anyways,
The opposite of it.
right. So I'm on Reddit, and if you ever want inspiration for something.
Inspiration. God.
Inspiration for the doom scroll?
Well, okay, so the real estate subreddit is a place I like to go because it's a place where you're not you're going to be talking to people that are coming from a lot of different backgrounds. They're going to be renters in there. There's going to be real estate brokers, mortgage brokers, attorneys. There's going to be a lot of just plain old consumers, and the reason, even though I get annoyed by some of the stuff I see there, because it's like, oh, how do you not know that? His nose up in the air. I really, I try to keep my finger on the pulse of the common man, so to speak. But a thread I saw that actually gave me a little bit of green shoots, if you will, is there was a thread where there were a number of people who were talking about, okay, interest rates have, settled at, wherever they're at. What are we doing now? What is our next move? And there were a lot of people talking. We've talked about how if you are at, let's say, 3% with your mortgage, and you want to move up because you need another bedroom because you've got another child on the way, but that move up is going to cost you
Way more.
so much more
Yeah.
that is prohibitive. One thing that a number of people in that thread were talking about is, look, yes, that is the case. The monthly payment is going to, is going to jump up. However, that monthly payment it also takes into consideration how much money you're putting down. A lot of people who bought homes in 2020 and 2021 have a lot of equity.
Yes, they do.
Okay. So even if you're moving up to a more expensive home at a higher interest rate, if you are rolling that equity into that next home, there's a path forward in many instances that I don't think until I saw that thread, I really had given a lot of consideration to. So when we talk about, sellers, just aren't going to want to be moving, I think we're going to...
More creative. People are going to get creative.
Sure. Well, okay. And we talked about seller credits. I think it's instructive to look at, say, for example, how did home sellers, new construction sellers, navigate the waters? How were they selling homes in the early 90s, in the early 80s, when you had interest rates that were up,
early 70s,
touching 20, right? How were they doing it? They were getting creative with offering, incentives, credits. We're gonna, we're gonna move some of these pieces on the chessboard around to make it work. And I think that when those are the professionals, and those kinds of things trickle down. You don't have to reinvent the wheel, right? You see, oh, that's how someone else is making this work. I should look into that more and find out more about it. I think we are going to see some people. Well, I think we're going to see more people adapting in different ways. Sellers are going to find ways to use the equity they've built up. The fact of housing costs getting higher, the price of homes getting higher. There's two sides to that equation. There's the buyer side, where there's a lot of understandable hand wringing about, I couldn't afford it when it was $100,000 less. What do you mean I'm supposed to buy it when it's $100,000 more? There are, on the other side of those equations, people with $100,000 more money that
equity
they can
that
use,
came fast,
right? That they can use to afford that next jump up, perhaps. So I think we're going to see more and more people. This was something I talked about several months ago, where it's the frog in the frying pan, right? You put the frog in the frying pan, turn the heat up. It's at a certain point, that's when you jump out. You don't jump out right when they turn the heat on. Steve, Google it. I'm not the one that came up with this. Okay,
this is a metaphor I've heard.
I can't claim to have.
And he always comes up with interesting stuff, though. I'm like, what?
Steve is always waiting. He's like, it's gonna come around.
It is.
He was just sitting there waiting right now. Like, here it comes.
It is.
Here
It's a gerbil starts going.
Yeah.
No, I hear you.
I do my best to pay off my very, very long-winded and winding and
You're
twisty.
fine.
That's just the way my brain works. The ADHD in me, it just goes like boom, 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 boom. Oh, and we'll circle it back, and here we go.
Found it.
So Steve, maybe you can tell me, have you seen anything along those lines in your conversations with prospective clients, or I would love to have Joey here. Thanks, stupid flu. But since we don't have Joey here, are you seeing anyone who's saying to you, look, we're gonna cut the cord on our 3%, knowing that we've got the equity and we're gonna do it.
Yeah, basically those conversations have been had, but I've also had the other conversations, which is, well, it doesn't make sense for me to sell, but I can go ahead and rent, right? And by all means, it makes sense, because if you can get positive cash flow out of it, why wouldn't you, right? If your rate is at 2.4% when we had it that low, then by all means, right? The other thing you can do is that if you bought that property and your rate is 2.3%, let's say, right, and you bought the property at 800 and now you could sell it for $1 million, well, that's 200,000 in equity, and then on top of that, whatever you've paid off as well. So again, if you bought an 18, 19, 17, like you said, there's equity in the house, and it's not just based off of what you paid. It's about what you can sell it for.
Yeah.
So what has happened is that I've talked to many people that they want to buy something bigger, right? They're having a kid on the way, or the fact is that their space just isn't doing it for them anymore. Or maybe they just want to buy. And the thing is that, okay, so based on what you're paying now, and rent goes back to rent, right? If you're paying $2,200 in rent right now, and you can buy a place, and now you're only going to pay $2,400 in mortgage. Well, that's only $200 more, and now you're building equity, right?
And a lot of that's going to be deductible on your income tax, which
That too.
Right.
That's one of those things that I think people kind of have
Gloss over.
They have a tendency to forget to mention that. Depending on your situation and how much interest and property taxes and all that you pay, once you get above the standard deduction, every additional dollar that you can deduct is less tax that you'll pay. And I know things have changed since they changed the tax code in 2018, but that used to be a huge thing where you'd say, look, at your tax rate, if you're deducting every bit of this mortgage interest, that's a hidden value that you didn't realize you were getting.
It is, but it's also something you don't want to just tell someone. It's the same thing as, oh, you're doing this? Oh, it's a write-off. Oh, it's a write-off. It's a write-off.
Right. Just
Let me tell you something.
Jerry, it's a write-off.
Let me tell you something. Talk to an accountant to figure out what your write-offs are.
100%.
Don't listen to Joe Schmo over there that says, not me. I'm just saying in general, like someone just like, oh, isn't that a write-off? Isn't that a write-off?
Yeah.
I buy season tickets for the Bears every year. Okay, it's painful. It's excruciatingly painful, especially when they suck. However, when they're good,
Current.
or if you appreciate football like I do, okay, then that amount you can write off so much. You can't write off the entire thing. You can only write off the entertainment aspect, food-wise, so on.
Yeah, they changed that
doesn't
on
mean
you.
17 beers with your buddies. It has
Yeah, it
to do
does.
with the fact of the food, right? So you got to be, right? So back to what we were talking about. Yeah, it's a write-off to a certain point, but having the clarification and the, again, being educated from your CPA will allow you to know, okay, this is how much I can write off. This is how much I can't. So depending on what you're buying, as far as your purchase and your home, finding out how that works as a write-off, finding out, whatnot, right? So I bought a car at one point, like the realtor thing. Like if you meet realtors, they most likely will have either a fancier SUV, okay, that's
Tesla.
heavier,
Tesla.
okay. No, it's fancier, well, technically, I guess.
So many Teslas.
Yeah, but you can't write them off because they're not heavy enough. And the other thing is that if a car is over, I think it's like 6,500 pounds or whatever it is type thing, there was a time when all kinds of agents were getting SUVs constantly. Jeeps were a big thing. I mean, Range Rovers for sure. But the thing is that how much is that actually allowed to be written off? So that's important to know these things.
Yes, all of this is to be said that no one that you've heard speak on this program is at all qualified to give you tax advice.
That is
Yeah,
correct.
that's true.
But here's my takeaway here. All right, so it's not about whether your Bears tickets are a write-off. That's for your accountant to decide. But I guess my overarching point is that before you let the news tell you, or social media, or really anything tell you whether or not a home is affordable for you, that is not where the inquiry should end. In fact, it's not even where it should begin. Where the inquiry should begin is talking to either someone like Steve or someone like Joey and finding out from them, what does it look like for me to buy a house? And what can I realistically borrow, and what is that monthly payment going to be? Boiling it down to the actual dollars and cents of it, rather than saying this house costs $100,000 more than it would have if I had bought in 2020, and therefore it's unaffordable. That's really fallacious. That's the kind of
Well, the conversation's
were
free.
thinking.
Right.
No.
It's so not that I don't want to get all fake newsy because that's a different radio station, but the whatever you're hearing, from whatever outlet that you prefer, that you consume, news or whatever.
Your media buy.
Yeah. Just chuck it out the window as far as, okay, so I want to, get into a housing situation, rent, buy, whatever it is. If you just default to the idea that, well, I can't afford to buy a home, I'm going to go out and look for something to rent. If that's where you're at mentally, all good, and this is all going to sound, very self-serving since I'm a real estate lawyer and I, make money when people buy and sell real estate. Suffice to say, I'm not going to represent every single person out there. I'm not even going to represent probably 1% of home buyers or sellers. So the decision you make, whether to buy or sell a house, really doesn't affect me personally, okay? I don't give this advice so that I have more business, because this advice is not going to get me more business. This advice is probably going to get some other lawyer more business, probably going to get some other real estate broker more business. So this advice is meant for people, right? So, and
where there's a will, there's a way, right? If you're thinking about it, it's worth that conversation. Talk to that realtor, talk to the mortgage broker, talk to your accountant. Maybe you can make that happen. Mm-hmm. You'd be surprised how they have financial instruments and things of that nature, or creative thinking that can get you to go.
There's a lot of products. There's a lot of products out there that will allow you to purchase.
Like
sure.
Home equity lines, all kinds of stuff that you can try to tap into to get what you need to get going. If you're feeling trapped, don't feel trapped.
Yeah,
talk to somebody and
the
see.
Vast majority of us are going to develop a significant portion of our lifetime wealth based on the purchase of the homes we live in. That's the bottom line. And Steve, you talked about people making the decision to rent out their home instead of sell and pay off that mortgage that's at a low interest rate. I saw a lot of that back in the Great Recession, where people were in homes, they needed to move on, but they were underwater, and so they became unwilling landlords. And that's another frog in a frying pan situation where at a certain point you go, you weigh the X and the Y of it. Usually it's when okay, hey, I'm netting $400 a month on this rental. It's free money basically, right? And then you get that call, and that call is, hey, it's -15.
I had the call on Monday.
The furnace went out.
I went and fixed the frozen pipes at my rental.
And then the next call is to Steve going, I got to get rid of this thing.
Yep.
I replaced all the mechanicals in my rental.
And that's because they were not educated on how everything works.
Sure.
Yep.
Yeah,
it makes a huge difference.
Well, and sometimes it's a it won't happen to me mentality. I was one of those people who bought a home in the beginning of 2007 at the peak of the market, and by 12 months into it, the place was worth $50,000 less. Ooh. And it's not an expensive place. I bought that place for $185,000 in 2007. It wasn't worth what I bought it for until I think 2021. But I was able to rent it out, and it worked. In 2021, I spent $10,000 replacing all the mechanicals, not because I had an extra $10,000 to spend, but because they all decided all at once to go, we're done. It's enough. I got $30,000. I got 30 years out of them. Mm-hmm. So
you won on that side.
I can hardly complain to that.
Eventually, they wear out.
They do. So words to the wise as far as if you're weighing those options. It's not an if thing, it's a when. You're going to have some big expense. And, the hassle of that, the phone calls never come at, 2 p.m. on a Wednesday. The phone calls invariably come at 9 p.m. on a Sunday. After you've, been to the Bears game with Steve and had not 17 beers, but a few.
And you're not looking to deal with it.
Absolutely not. Voicemail. Yeah. Tomorrow. We'll talk tomorrow. Guys,
why does this person keep calling me? I don't understand.
The new phone. Who dis? We're just about out of time. Real quick, Mark, tell me about you and your company.
Chicagoland Home Inspectors. You can reach us at thehomeinspectors.com, or you can call 312-544-9180 if you need us. We're willing to come out, even in the cold. Any house, any size.
24/7. Call and dial the number 3. You will get Charlie. He'll pick up at 2 a.m.
Well, maybe not that.
Man,
but
you're gonna seriously get some crap for that.
If he cared, he'd be here to defend himself.
Right? That's gonna be a phone call later.
That's what's up. I am going to clip that. And send
he
it to
hears
him.
that one.
Steve, tell me about you and tell me about what you do, how to get a hold of you.
Sure. Steve Davis, Compass Residential Real Estate. My number is 312-513-6314. 312-513-6314. My email address is stevedavis@compass.com, and my Instagram is I'm Steve Davis. Please do follow, like, and share.
That is what's up. I'm Patrick Loftus. I'm a real estate lawyer with Loftus Law. Find me on Instagram, Loftus_law. Find me on TikTok at Loftus Law. You know, we are in business to make money, but it just so happens our business is also helping people. So reach out because we'd like to help because it also gets us paid. Guys, this has been the Homebuyer's Hour on WCPT AM 820, where facts matter. And I am out of here.
Bye-bye.
Later.